A wealthy CEO falls for a humble waitress, unaware she's an heiress hiding her identity. As love blossoms, secrets threaten to unravel everything. And if you cherish your family and love videos like this, subscribe to our channel to have 10 years of luck in your life. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of the Coffee Bean Cafe as Hyunwoo stepped inside, his polished leather shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. The cafe wasn't his usual choice. He typically favored high-end establishments with exclusive clientele, but something about the warm lighting and rustic decor drew him in. The aroma of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air, a welcome change from the sterile atmosphere of his corporate office. Behind the counter, Soo-yeon methodically prepared drinks, her movements precise and focused. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her cafe uniform was pristine despite the morning rush. She didn't look up when Hyunwoo approached the counter, too absorbed in her work to notice the tall figure in an expensive suit standing before her. "Welcome to Coffee Bean," she said automatically, finally lifting her gaze. Her practiced smile faltered slightly when she met Hyunwoo's eyes. He wasn't their typical customer. Everything from his tailored suit to his confident stance spoke of wealth and status. Hyunwoo studied the menu board, though he barely registered the items listed. Instead, he found himself watching Soo-yeon's reflection in the glass display case, intrigued by her composed demeanor. "What would you recommend?" he asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to giving orders rather than taking them. Soo-yeon's recommendation came without hesitation. "Our house blend is popular, but if you're looking for something special, I'd suggest our single-origin Ethiopian beans. The flavor profile is complex, notes of bergamot and dark chocolate." Her knowledge impressed him. This wasn't the scripted response he'd expected from a cafe worker. Hyunwoo nodded. "I'll try that." As Soo-yeon turned to prepare his drink, her elbow caught the edge of an empty, ceramic mug. It teetered on the counter before crashing to the floor, shattering into pieces. She immediately dropped to her knees, reaching for the fragments with trembling hands. "I'll help," Hyunwoo said, crouching down beside her without hesitation, despite his expensive suit. Their hands nearly touched as they both reached for the same piece of broken ceramic. "Please, sir, you don't have to," Soo-yeon protested, her cheeks flushing pink. "You'll ruin your suit." "It's just a suit," he replied, surprising himself with the casualness of his response. In any other situation, he would have been concerned about the $1,000 fabric, but something about Soo-yeon's embarrassment made such concerns seem trivial. They cleaned up the mess together, and when their eyes met again, Soo-yeon's smile was genuine, no longer the practiced expression of customer service. Hyunwoo felt something shift in his chest, a sensation he couldn't quite name. She insisted on making his coffee personally, taking extra care with the preparation. The rich aroma of the Ethiopian beans filled the air between them as she worked. When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed briefly, and Hyunwoo noticed how delicate her hands were, despite the calluses from work. "On the house," she said softly, to apologize for the commotion. "That's not necessary," he replied, already reaching for his wallet. "Please, I insist," she said firmly, and something in her tone told him not to argue. As Hyunwoo left the cafe, he found himself looking back through the window. Soo-yeon had already returned to her work, but there was something different about her movements now, a slight tension in her shoulders that hadn't been there before. Throughout his day at the office, Hyunwoo couldn't shake thoughts of the cafe and its intriguing barista. The coffee sat calm and forgotten on his desk as he found himself replaying their brief interaction. There was something refreshing about how she'd handled the situation. No excessive apologies or attempts to flatter him, just genuine sincerity. That evening, as his driver asked about their route home, Hyunwoo found himself thinking about tomorrow's schedule. For the first time in years, he considered changing his morning routine. The Ethiopian coffee had been exceptional, he told himself, though he knew it wasn't just the coffee drawing him back. Inside the cafe's break room, Soo-yeon sat across from Mira during their lunch break, picking at her kimbap without much interest. The small room smelled of cleaning supplies and coffee grounds, a familiar comfort after years of working together. "He came back again today," Soo-yeon said, trying to sound casual. "Third time this week." Mireille set down her chopsticks, her expression turning serious. The CEO? Soo-yeon, you need to be careful. Men like that don't usually spend their mornings in places like this unless they want something. It's not like that, Soo-yeon defended, though her voice carried a hint of uncertainty. He's different. He treats everyone here with respect, even the cleaning staff. Yesterday, he helped old Mrs. Kim with her heavy shopping bags when she was struggling with the door. That's exactly what worries me, Mireille countered, leaning forward. Someone in his position doesn't just randomly start frequenting a neighborhood cafe and helping elderly customers. The social gap between you two is too wide. These kinds of relationships never end well. Outside the cafe, Jaemin sat in his parked Mercedes, his tinted windows providing perfect cover for observation. He adjusted his expensive camera lens, focusing on Hyunwoo as he emerged from the cafe. The usually stern CEO was smiling, a sight rare enough to warrant documentation. Jaemin's phone buzzed with a message from his secretary. Board meeting in 30 minutes. Your presence is required. He ignored it, instead making notes in his leather-bound notebook. Asterisk visits cafe daily between 8:30 to 9 a.m. Asterisk spends average 15 to 20 minutes inside. Asterisk always orders from same barista. Asterisk shows uncharacteristic behavior. Smiling, casual conversation. Something wasn't adding up. Hyunwoo was known for his rigid schedule and exclusive tastes. This deviation from his normal routine warranted investigation. Jaemin had been watching his rivals rise in the business world for years, waiting for any sign of weakness or scandal. Later that afternoon, Jaemin called in his private investigator. I need everything you can find on a barista at Coffee Bean Cafe. Female, mid-20s, works morning shifts. Name tag reads Soo-yeon. He slid across an envelope thick with cash. Priority level 1. The investigator raised an eyebrow at the amount. Must be someone important. She will be, Jaemin replied, his fingers drumming against his desk. She's either hiding something significant, or she's about to become Hyunwoo's biggest mistake. Either way, I want to know everything. Back at the cafe, Soo-yeon felt uneasy as she wiped down tables. Mireille's words echoed in her mind, mixing with her own doubts. She glanced at her reflection in the window. Simple uniform, practical shoes, hair tied back practically. Then she thought of her family's mansion, the designer clothes gathering dust in her old closet, the trust fund she'd walked away from. Mireille approached with fresh cleaning supplies. I saw that fancy car parked outside again today. The black one with tinted windows. Been there 3 days straight now. Soo-yeon's hands froze mid-wipe. She'd noticed it too, but had tried to convince herself it was coincidence. Maybe someone moved into the neighborhood? Maybe, Mireille said skeptically. But they never come in. They just sit there, watching. That evening, Jaemin sat in his office reviewing security camera footage from the cafe's street.
He paused on
a frame showing Soo-yeon leaving after her shift, studying her posture and movements. There was something familiar about her way of walking, the slight lift of her chin, mannerisms that seemed out of place for a simple barista. His computer pinged with an incoming email. The subject line read, Preliminary findings, Soo-yeon investigation. Jaemin's lips curved into a smile as he opened the attachment. The first line confirmed his suspicions. No social media presence, no public records, no digital footprint. In his experience, people only went to such lengths to hide their identity when they had something valuable to protect. Got you, he murmured, reaching for his phone to arrange a more thorough investigation. Whatever secrets this barista was hiding, they would soon be his to use against Hyunwoo. Hyunwoo and Soo-yeon fell into a comfortable routine over the following weeks. Their morning interactions extended beyond simple coffee orders into genuine conversations. They sat at a corner table during her breaks, their discussions flowing naturally despite their apparent differences in social status. What made you choose to work here? Hyunwoo asked one morning, genuine curiosity in his voice. The cafe was quiet, the morning rush having subsided. Soo-yeon carefully considered her response, stirring her own cup of coffee. I wanted to build something for myself, she said, the truth mixing with necessary omission. To know that what I have, I earned through my own efforts. Hyunwoo nodded, understanding resonating in his expression. I started my company from nothing. Well, almost nothing, he admitted. My education gave me advantages, but every contract, every deal, I earned those myself. While they shared these moments, Soo-yeon's phone buzzed continuously with messages from her family. Each notification felt like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. The board meeting is next week. Your presence is required. Your father's patience is wearing thin. The Jung family's son is asking about you. She silenced her phone, trying to focus on Hyunwoo's warm smile and engaging stories. But reality had a way of intruding. During one of their conversations, her mother's personal assistant entered the cafe. Soo-yeon excused herself quickly, hiding in the storage room until the woman left. Meanwhile, across the city, Jaemin attended a charity gala hosted by Seoul's elite. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. The evening seemed unremarkable until he spotted a familiar face in an old photograph on display, a family portrait of the reclusive Park business dynasty. His eyes locked onto the youngest daughter in the photo. Though she wore designer clothes and an elegant hairstyle, her features were unmistakable. It was Soo-yeon, the barista who had captured Hyunwoo's attention. Interesting choice of venue, a voice beside him remarked. Jaemin turned to find Mr. Park, Soo-yeon's father, studying him. This photo was taken before my youngest daughter decided to pursue her own path. A shame she couldn't be here tonight, Jaemin replied carefully, his mind already racing with possibilities. Mr. Park's expression hardened. Indeed. She prefers simpler establishments these days. Coffee shops, I believe. The implications of this discovery thrilled Jaemin. Hyunwoo, who prided himself on being self-made, was unknowingly pursuing the heiress to one of Korea's largest fortunes. The irony was delicious. Back at the cafe, Soo-yeon struggled with her growing feelings for Hyunwoo. He represented everything she'd tried to escape, the corporate world, wealth, status, yet his genuine nature and understanding heart drew her in. During their conversations, she found herself sharing more than she intended, though always carefully avoiding details about her past. Sometimes I feel trapped between who I am and who others want me to be, she confided one evening as they walked through a nearby park after her shift. Hyunwoo stopped walking, turning to face her. Who do you want to be? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Before she could answer, her phone rang, her father's private number. She declined the call, but the moment was broken. Jaemin spent the next few days gathering evidence. Photographs, documents, newspaper clippings about the Park family's missing heiress. He arranged them meticulously in a file, imagining Hyunwoo's reaction when he learned the truth. The revelation would shake his rival's confidence, perhaps enough to destabilize his position in their upcoming business negotiations. Success often depends on knowing what others want to hide, Jaemin mused, closing the file that held Soo-yeon's secret. He planned to use this information strategically, waiting for the perfect moment to cause maximum damage to both Hyunwoo's reputation and his growing relationship with Soo-yeon. The corporate boardroom buzzed with tension as executives gathered for Hyunwoo's quarterly presentation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Seoul's skyline, but all eyes were fixed on the sleek presentation screen. Hyunwoo stood confidently at the front, until Jaemin's voice cut through his introduction. Before we proceed, Jaemin interrupted, straightening his tie. Shouldn't we discuss the CEO's recent distractions? He pulled up a photo on the main screen showing Hyunwoo at the coffee shop. Our company's reputation rests on maintaining certain standards, particularly in terms of the company we keep. Whispers rippled through the room. Hyunwoo maintained his composure, though his jaw tightened noticeably. My personal life has no bearing on today's presentation. Doesn't it? Jaemin pressed, sliding another photo onto the screen. This one showing Hyunwoo and Soo-yeon walking together. Sources suggest your new friend might be more than she appears. Perhaps someone of significant social standing hiding behind a barista's apron. The board members exchanged glances. Rumors spread quickly through the corporate grapevine, whispers about secret identities and hidden agendas. Hyunwoo completed his presentation, but the damage was done. Questions about his judgment had been planted. Later that evening, Hyunwoo waited outside the cafe after closing time. Soo-yeon emerged, surprised to see him looking troubled. "Is everything okay?" she asked, noting his unusually serious expression. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "There are rumors circulating about you, about us. Things that don't add up." He watched her face carefully. "Who are you really, Soo-yeon?" She felt her heart race. The moment she dreaded had arrived. "Hyunwoo, I can explain." Before she could continue, a familiar black car pulled up beside them. Jaemin stepped out, his timing calculated for maximum impact. "Why don't I help with that explanation?" he suggested smoothly. "After all, Mississippi Park, your family has been quite concerned about your extended absence from their social circles." The color drained from Soo-yeon's face. Hyunwoo looked between them, confusion turning to realization. "Park? As in Park Industries?" "The very same," Jaemin confirmed, clearly enjoying the moment. "You've been courting the runaway heiress of the Park fortune. Quite a step up from your usual social circle, wouldn't you say?" Hyunwoo's expression hardened as pieces fell into place. Soo-yeon's knowledge of business terms she should know, her perfect posture, her careful avoidance of certain topics. "All this time," he said quietly, "you've been lying to me?"
No.
Soo-yeon protested. "I never lied about who I am as a person. I just didn't tell you everything about my background." "A lie of omission is still a lie," Jaemin interjected smoothly. "And quite a significant one. Wouldn't you agree, Hyunwoo? The woman you thought was a simple barista is actually worth more than your entire company." Hyunwoo stepped back, his professional mask sliding into place, the same one he wore during difficult business negotiations. "I think we're done here," he said coldly, turning to leave. "Hyunwoo, please," Soo-yeon called after him, but he kept walking. She watched him disappear into the night, tears threatening to fall. Jaemin placed a seemingly sympathetic hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, Mississippi Park. He was never going to understand someone of your standing anyway. Shall I call your father's driver?" Soo-yeon shrugged his hand off, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "You planned this, didn't you? You've been watching us, waiting for the right moment." "Business is business," he replied simply. "And love? That's the biggest business of all in our social circle, isn't it?" She walked away from him, leaving both men behind, feeling her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The simple life she'd built, the genuine connection she'd found with Hyunwoo, all of it now tainted by the truth of her identity. Hyunwoo sat alone in his penthouse office, the city lights twinkling below through floor-to-ceiling windows. An untouched glass of whiskey sat on his desk as he scrolled through news articles about the Park family. Each photo of a younger Soo-yeon at galas and charity events felt like another betrayal. The contrast between the polished heiress in designer gowns and the barista he'd fallen for was stark. Meanwhile, Soo-yeon hadn't returned to work. She sat in her modest apartment, surrounded by the simple life she'd chosen. Mireille had been calling repeatedly, but she couldn't bring herself to answer. The carefully constructed walls between her two worlds had crumbled, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. A knock at her door broke the silence. When she opened it, Jaemin stood there, holding a bouquet of expensive flowers. "I thought you might need a friend," he said, his voice carefully modulated to show concern. "A friend wouldn't have exposed me like that," Soo-yeon replied, but she didn't close the door. "I did you a favor," Jaemin said, stepping inside uninvited. "How long did you think you could keep up this charade? Your father asks about you at every board meeting. The business world is too small for secrets this big." He moved through her apartment, taking in the modest furnishings with barely concealed disdain. "You don't belong here, Soo-yeon. You were born for better things than serving coffee to strangers." "I was happy," she said quietly. "Were you? Or were you just hiding?" Jaemin's words hit uncomfortably close to home. "Hyunwoo isn't angry because of who you are, he's angry because you didn't trust him with the truth." Across town, Mireille finally tracked down Hyunwoo at his company. She convinced his secretary to let her in by claiming to have important documents from Soo-yeon. When she entered his office, he looked up with tired eyes. "You need to hear something," Mireille said without preamble. I've worked with Soo-yeon for 2 years. Do you know what she does with her salary? She donates most of it to small business owners who can't get loans. She works overtime to cover other people's shifts when they need to care for their families. The girl you fell for? That's the real her. Hyunwoo's expression remained neutral. She lied to me. No, she showed you who she really is, Mireille countered. The heiress, the fortune, the family name, that's what she was running from. The girl who makes your coffee every morning, who remembers everyone's orders, who helps old Mrs. Kim with her groceries, that's who she chose to be. She placed a small package on his desk. She left this for you. It's all the tips you've given her over the months. She never spent a single one. Said it felt wrong taking money from someone who saw her as an equal. After Mireille left, Hyunwoo opened the package. Inside was a stack of neatly bundled bills and a handwritten note. I'm sorry, I couldn't tell you the truth.
But
Everything else, every smile, every conversation, every moment was real. Meanwhile, Soo-yeon finally checked her phone, finding dozens of missed calls from her family. A text from her father read, "It's time to come home. The charade is over." Another from her mother, "We can handle the publicity." The Jung family is still interested in a merger through marriage. Jaemin, still in her apartment, watched her reading messages.
see,
Everything can go back to normal. Your family will forgive your little adventure, and soon it will be like none of this ever happened. Normal. Soo-yeon laughed bitterly. Living in a gilded cage, marrying for business advantages, attending charity events where people donate less than they spend on their outfits. It's who you are, Jaemin insisted. Who you were born to be. No, Soo-yeon said firmly, standing up. It's who I was born as. Who I am is someone I got to choose for myself. Hyunwoo buried himself in work, spending long hours in his office reviewing contracts and acquisition proposals. His secretary noticed he'd stopped ordering coffee altogether, switching to energy drinks that left untouched rings on financial reports. Despite his attempts to focus, his mind kept drifting to mornings spent in a small cafe, watching Soo-yeon work with quiet confidence. During a late-night meeting, an executive mentioned the Park family's recent business movements. They're consolidating assets, he reported. Rumors suggest they're preparing for a major announcement. Something about their youngest daughter's return. Hyunwoo's pen stopped moving. The thought of Soo-yeon being pushed into an arranged marriage for business purposes made his stomach turn. He remembered their conversations about building things independently, about earning respect through work rather than inheritance. In the Park family mansion, Soo-yeon sat stiffly in her father's study, wearing a designer dress that felt like a costume. Her mother paced behind her, listing potential marriage candidates. The Jung family's eldest son has expressed particular interest, her mother said, checking her tablet. Their technology division would complement our manufacturing base perfectly. The merger possibilities are endless. I'm not a business asset to be merged, Soo-yeon responded, her voice tight. Her father looked up from his desk. No, you're my daughter, who spent 2 years playing peasant while shirking her responsibilities. That ends now. The board expects you at next week's meeting. Your place is here, not serving coffee to strangers. Those strangers treated me like a person, not a portfolio addition, Soo-yeon countered. Is that what Hyunwoo did? Jaemin's voice came from the doorway. He'd taken to showing up uninvited, positioning himself as a family advisor. Treated you like a person? Then why did he walk away when he learned the truth? Soo-yeon's father nodded approvingly. Jaemin understands our world. He knows the responsibilities that come with our position. Perhaps you should consider his guidance. Jaemin stepped closer, his voice softening with practiced concern. You're just running away from who you are, Soo-yeon. Every day you spent in that cafe was another day of denying your true self. My true self. Soo-yeon stood up, anger finally breaking through her composed exterior. You don't know anything about my true self. None of you do. We know what's best for you, her mother interjected. This rebellion has gone on long enough. Later that evening, alone in her old bedroom, Soo-yeon looked at the photos on her walls, pictures of charity galas, business functions, family portraits where everyone wore practiced smiles. She pulled out her phone and looked at a candid photo Mireille had taken of her at the cafe, laughing while making coffee. The difference in her expression was stark. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jamin. "Your father mentioned you're joining tomorrow's board meeting. I'll send AC.
Ar.
It's time to embrace your destiny." Destiny. The word felt heavy, suffocating. She remembered Hyunwoo asking her once what she wanted from life. At the time, she couldn't answer. Now, watching the sun set over the city from her family's mansion, the answer seemed clear, but it might be too late. The annual Business Leaders Gala transformed Seoul's grand hotel ballroom into a showcase of wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers cast elegant light over guests in designer evening wear, while servers circulated with champagne on silver trays. Jamin stood near the entrance, checking his watch repeatedly, his dark tuxedo impeccable. Behind the scenes, Soo-yeon sat in the preparation room, staring at her reflection. Her stylist had spent hours transforming her back into the Park heiress, designer gown, professional makeup, elaborate updo. She barely recognized herself. Hyunwoo arrived later than usual, having debated attending at all. His assistant had insisted it would look suspicious if he missed such a significant event. As he entered, conversations hushed briefly. News of his connection to the Park heiress had spread through business circles. Jamin approached the stage where the evening's presentations would take place, reviewing note cards in his hand. He'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, planning his words for maximum impact. His speech would expose not just Soo-yeon's deception but paint Hyunwoo as a social climber who deliberately pursued the Park heiress. The room quieted as Mr. Park took the microphone. "Tonight, we have a special announcement," he began, nodding toward Jamin. "But first, I'd like to welcome back my daughter, Soo-yeon, who has finally returned to take her rightful place in our business community." Soo-yeon entered from the side door, and the crowd turned to look. She walked with practiced grace, but her eyes scanned the room until they found Hyunwoo. Their gazes locked for a moment before both looked away. Jamin ascended to the podium, adjusting his microphone. "Good evening, distinguished guests. Tonight is about truth and transparency in our business community." He paused, making eye contact with key board members. Recent events have shown us that appearances can be deceiving. Hyunwoo tensed, recognizing the threat in Jamin's tone. He noticed Soo-yeon's hands clenching the fabric of her dress, her knuckles white with tension. "Some among us," Jamin continued, "have hidden their true identities, playing roles far beneath their station." He reached for remote control, presumably to show prepared slides, while others have orchestrated careful campaigns to climb our social ladder. The tension in the room built as Jamin approached his revelation. Whispers circulated through the crowd. Phones emerged to record what promised to be a scandal-worthy moment. Security guards positioned themselves near the exits, a detail that didn't escape Hyunwoo's notice. This wasn't just an exposure of secrets, it was a carefully orchestrated takedown. So tonight, Jamin lifted his champagne glass, his smile sharp as a blade. "I'd like to propose a toast. To masks falling away and true natures being revealed. To the Park family's prodigal daughter, and to those who would use her for their own advancement." The moment stretched like a wire about to snap. Soo-yeon stood frozen, feeling hundreds of eyes on her. Hyunwoo straightened his tie, preparing for whatever accusations were about to fly. And Jamin, confident in his victory, opened his mouth to deliver the final blow. Soo-yeon stood before Jamin reached his final revelation. The sound of her chair scraping back cut through the tense silence. Every head turned toward her, including her father's, whose expression darkened with warning. "Since we're talking about truth tonight," she said, her voice clear and steady despite her racing heart, "let me tell my own story." She moved toward the podium, each step deliberate, TE in her designer heels. Jamin's smile faltered. This wasn't part of his script. He tried to maintain control. "Perhaps this isn't the best time dash. It's exactly the time," Soo-yeon interrupted, taking the microphone. She faced the crowd of Seoul's elite, seeing familiar faces from years of galas and board meetings. 2 years ago, I walked away from this world. Not because I was running from responsibility, but because I was running toward authenticity. The room remained silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on her. She continued, I chose to work in a cafe. Not to hide, not to deceive, but to prove something to myself. That I could be valued for my work, not my family name. That I could make genuine connections without agenda or advantage. Hyunwoo stood motionless, his eyes never leaving her face as she spoke. He recognized this Soo-yeon, not the polished heiress in an evening gown, but the honest, direct woman he'd fallen for over countless morning coffees. Yes, I'm Park Soo-yeon, she acknowledged. But I'm also just Soo-yeon, who makes your coffee, who remembers your orders, who chose a simple life over a privileged one. Both are true. Neither is a lie. Jaemin attempted to regain control. How touching. But let's discuss why certain CEOs suddenly became interested in frequenting small cafes. I didn't know. Hyunwoo's voice cut through the room as he stepped forward. The crowd parted around him as he approached the podium. I had no idea who she was. I fell in love with a barista who challenged my views, who showed me kindness without wanting anything in return. Jaemin's carefully constructed narrative began crumbling. The timing is rather convenient. Speaking of timing, Hyunwoo interrupted, his business instincts kicking in. Let's discuss your recent investment patterns, Jaemin. Your sudden interest in the Park family's internal affairs. Your careful manipulation of this situation. The atmosphere shifted. Board members and executives exchanged glances, remembering Jaemin's recent business moves that now appeared suspiciously calculated. Mr. Park stepped forward, his expression thunderous. Young man, what exactly are you implying? Before Jaemin could respond, Soo-yeon spoke again. I lived in both worlds. I've seen how power moves in boardrooms and how it moves in a small cafe. And I can tell you, the most dishonest person in this room isn't the barista who hid her name. It's the businessman who's trying to manipulate all of us for his own gain. The crowd buzzed with whispers. Several phones emerged, recording the unfolding drama. Jaemin's confident facade began to crack as he realized his plan was backfiring spectacularly. After the gala, Hyunwoo and Soo-yeon found themselves in the hotel's empty garden. The distant sound of traffic mixed with classical music drifting from the ballroom. They stood in silence for a moment, both still processing the evening's events. I should have told you sooner, Soo-yeon said finally, her fingers tracing the pattern on the stone balustrade. But I was afraid that once you knew, everything would change. Hyunwoo loosened his tie, looking more like the man who used to visit her cafe. It did change, he admitted. But not for the reasons you think. I felt betrayed not because of who you are, but because you didn't trust me enough to tell me. Inside the hotel, Jaemin was frantically making phone calls. His carefully constructed plan had collapsed, but he wasn't finished. Release everything, he ordered into his phone. Contact every news outlet. I want the full story running by morning. Their secret meetings, the deception, all of it. Media alerts started buzzing on guests' phones. Breaking. Park heiress secret identity revealed. Corporate scandal unfolds. Photos of Hyunwoo and Soo-yeon at the cafe began circulating online, accompanied by increasingly sensational headlines. Soo-yeon's phone lit up with messages from her family. Father, come home immediately. Why? We need to control this narrative. Mother, the Jung family is withdrawing their proposal. Do you realize what you've done? Hyunwoo noticed her distress. Your family? They want me to return to their world, she said, looking out over the city lights. To fix this through carefully worded press releases and strategic marriages. And what do you want? Before she could answer, Jaemin appeared in the garden doorway. His composure had cracked, revealing the desperate man beneath the polished exterior. You think this is over? He called out. You've just made it worse. By morning, every newspaper in Korea will know how the great Hyunwoo seduced a chaebol heiress in a common coffee shop. That's not what happened, Hyunwoo stated firmly. Truth doesn't matter in our world. Jaemin sneered. Only perception. And I control that now. Soo-yeon stepped forward. No, you don't. Because unlike you, I'm not afraid of the truth anymore. She turned to Hyunwoo. My whole life, I've been told who to be, how to act, what to want. Working at the cafe was the first time I got to choose for myself. And look where that got you, Jamin interjected. A scandal that will damage both your reputations. Your father's company's stock will plummet when the markets open. Then let it fall, Soo-yeon declared. I'd rather be honest about who I am than live another day pretending. Hyunwoo reached for her hand, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Jamin or the photographers who had discovered their location. Camera flashes erupted from the bushes, capturing the moment. Perfect, Jamin smiled coldly. Tomorrow's headlines write themselves. I wonder how your shareholders will react, Hyunwoo, when they see their CEO caught in a chaebol love scandal. Soo-yeon's phone rang with her father's private ringtone. The garden fell silent as she answered on speaker. Either return home now and agree to the Jung merger, or Hyunwoo's company faces a hostile takeover. Your choice. Jamin's smile widened at this development, but something in his expression shifted when his own phone buzzed. The message preview made his face pale. Evidence of market manipulation found. Emergency board meeting called. You didn't think I'd look into your recent activities? Hyunwoo asked calmly. While you were busy investigating Soo-yeon, my team was tracking your suspicious investment patterns, particularly your attempts to manipulate Park Industries' stock prices. Jamin's composure cracked completely. You're bluffing. The same way you were bluffing about having my father's support? A new voice joined them. Everyone turned to see Jin-ho, Jamin's father, emerging from the shadows. I received some interesting documents about your recent activities, son. Care to explain why you've been secretly shorting our family company stocks? The truth unraveled rapidly. Jamin had orchestrated the entire situation, manipulating both family stocks, planning to profit from the scandal he would create. He'd hoped to destroy Hyunwoo's reputation while simultaneously forcing Soo-yeon into a position where she'd need his help to manage the fallout. It was never about protecting business interests or exposing truth, Hyunwoo stated. You wanted to control both our families through scandal and financial manipulation. Soo-yeon turned to her father, still on the phone. Do you understand now, father? This is why I left. This world of manipulation and power plays, it's not who I am. There was a long pause before Mr. Park spoke again. Perhaps I understood more than you think. Why else would I have let you maintain your secret life for 2 years? Everyone froze. Soo-yeon's eyes widened. You knew? Of course I knew. I'm your father. I had you watch to ensure your safety, but I saw how happy you were building something on your own. I just didn't expect it to intersect with our world like this. Jamin's father gripped his son's shoe.
Firmly.
We'll discuss your actions in detail tomorrow. For now, I believe you have some resignations to prepare. As Jamin was led away, Soo-yeon and Hyunwoo faced each other in the quiet garden. The city lights twinkled below, and the distant sounds of the gala continued. So, Hyunwoo said softly, a coffee shop owner and a CEO? Soo-yeon smiled, genuine and free for the first time in weeks. Actually, I was thinking of expanding. The city could use more places where people can just be themselves, regardless of who they are outside. Sounds like a business proposal, he replied, taking her hand. I know a CEO who might be interested in investing, strictly as a silent partner, of course. He's learned the value of letting people build things their own way. Their story made headlines the next day, but not the ones Jamin had planned. Instead, it became a tale of authenticity triumphing over manipulation, of choosing one's own path despite expectations, and of love that bridged worlds not through deception, but through truth.
The end.